This is Bill Newman, WHMP.
Welcome to NPR with Northampton Poet Laureate Rich Michelson.
It's Northampton Poetry Radio. You have to say
Northampton Poetry Radio,
that's
why.
They insist on saying that, but really it is NPR. Northampton Poetry Radio. Okay, Rich Michelson.
Okay, back to WHMP, where we turn up the volume a little bit. So on an NPR Radio, obviously we have had a nice string here. We've interviewed our national poet laureates, Kay Ryan and W.S. Merwin, were our last two shows. But just as importantly, in fact, I think more importantly, is to shed a light on some of the happenings and some of the great poets right here in the Valley, because we have world-class poets here. And today we are going to talk a little bit with Annie Love Woodhull. And there is a reading tonight at the APE Gallery. Where is that? Anybody know? Oh, next to our Michelson Galleries. Throw that in. On Main Street in Northampton at 7:30. Come in here, Annie, tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about her. She has a brand new book out called Night with Its Owl, and it is by Hedgerow Books. We also have D.M. Gordon with us today, who is a wonderful poet in her own right, and her book, also by the same press, came out, I think, a couple of years ago. And it was nightly at the Institute of the Possible. It was a Mass Center for the Book must-read selection, and let me echo that. It is a must-read selection. We're going to get to D.M. Gordon shortly, but let's start with Annie. First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
This is a great fun for me because Annie and I are friends. I've had the great pleasure of watching many of these poems develop over the years. We are in a Monday night work group. And what really strikes me about your work is you really have developed a unique voice. And I still, after all these years, am not quite sure how you pull it off. When you read one of your poems, it's really distinctively yours. The grammar is often either dispensed with or changed around in a way that heightens the emotion of your poems. Is that I'm going to have you read I'm going to start out by reading a poem so people can get a sense, and then let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's pick up and start with a poem.
Okay, great. In My Ohio.
In My Ohio.
In My Ohio. At first, a festival of hopping and leaping, the miracle of something coming out of the sky with wings, the same size as my palm at 7. Blown in from farther west where grass was all you'd see, touching blue that was all you were under, the plains in undisturbed light, no trees, no shadow, then lightning. The locusts, little arrows of novelty until they ate too much, chewing what leaves meant into skeletons, leaving the petals of red zinnias like dried drops of blood. Thousands became one terrifying thing. I couldn't stand to touch them. I had never seen the way one thing can completely ruin another.
That's beautiful. I think that's really typical of your poems. You often work with the natural world.
I do.
And you show it to us anew, both with, well, basically the terror and the light. There's a wildness in your poems.
Good.
That it seems to be always there. Is that something that, tell us a little bit about where that came from. Is that something you've always had, your style? Is this natural to you? How hard do you work to get that intense grammar in your poems?
So the grammar is completely by accident.
Okay.
It's really that I'm kind of illiterate.
All right.
And it has nothing to do with trying to do
Isn't that great behind the scenes?
This isn't about the natural world. This is about you had a disagreement with your second grade teacher, and here we are successfully
Really.
having shown her you were right.
Yes. So I really did skip over grammar when I grew up. It didn't go into me. So when I try to express myself, I think sometimes I come out in a kind of bumbling way, and then with poetry, it seems to coalesce into something else. But people at group have asked me, how do you do that? And it's not something I do. It's something that happens. And then I think I'm very interested in the natural world, and I grew up in it, and I'm interested in...
You grew up where?
In the natural world, in Ohio.
In Ohio?
Yep.
Okay.
And I am interested in opposing forces.
Where in Ohio?
Dayton, Ohio. Lots of people in Northampton from Dayton, Ohio.
I spent very happy moments, which will pass over now, in Dayton.
Okay, good.
When I went to Antioch.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And so you've been writing your whole life?
No, just for about 20 years. Yep.
And what brought so you moved to Northampton and everybody was writing, so
Well,
it was natural?
I was always looking for a creative form, and I tried different things. And then these friends, writing was always sort of in the back of my mind. My mother loved poetry. And so then I started in a writers group here, and then moved from Dina's writers group to Doug Anderson's, to Ellen Watson, and then to not really needing a writers group.
All right, and I think all those
So-
people have been on the show here. We've had Ellen on and Doug. I mean, it really is a community of people helping poets helping each other. That's kind of nice. And and this. Let me just turn to DM for a moment, Diana, and ask you about this series that Hedgerow Books, which is a locally based. It comes out of Levelers Press, which I think is an outgrowth of Collective Copies.
It's been now established as its own thing, but Collective Copies in Amherst and Florence. Steve Strymer has been printing out the manuscripts of poets and writers in this valley, and became aware that they are so talented. And it's been a dream of his to get behind these voices. And
Steve's been behind a lot of great things happening in this valley. I think he's brought attention to certainly a lot of the African American history in the area. I think he was a lot behind the Sojourner Truth Memorial. And I have to say, these books are beautiful. I mean, they're a work of art in themselves. And you had the first book in the series?
yes, he invited me first, and then Hedgerow Books has grown out of that.
And you're the editor of the full series? Is that-
Yes,
I mean,
at
how
this point.
does that work?
Yes,
So
and-
people are submitting work to you? Is it just local?
We have an open reading period, because just as soon as Steve kind of said, okay, I'm going to financially and fully get behind publishing the poets of this valley, you can imagine how many people were interested and how many manuscripts started coming to him. So there was a problem about how to keep that manageable. So an open reading period was established. We'll have another one coming up in the end of the summer. And this is how Annie's book was chosen. It was they're blind submissions, and the first group of readers who read these books are not in the valley. They're all valley people who are submitting are all valley people. The 4 counties of Western Massachusetts are eligible. But we have MFA faculty members and published poets from San Francisco to Maine who read the first round completely blind, and they choose a list of like 10 finalists, and then it comes back and the full manuscripts are considered here.
And let's you're listening to NPR on WHMP. This is Northampton Poetry Radio with Annie Love Woodhull and DM Thomas. So Annie, can I impose
Rich,
upon you?
I want to go back and ask if I might.
Your show.
Well,
Ask whatever you want.
I want to. No, I sorry to interrupt your segment, but I'd like to know. We've had some poet laureates on the show that Rich has brought with him the last couple of months, and what they will say and do say is poetry is a really impossible way to try to make a living, and the publication of books of poetry is. Well, it's not necessarily economic suicide, but it doesn't pay for itself. How do you, at Levelers Press and in this poetry series that you are conducting and these books you're publishing, how do you make this economically viable?
Steve has a way. He has a business model. Part of it comes from the fact that he can print books on demand so that there's no warehousing. There's not a run of 500 or 1,000 books that he's paying for up front. But if Amazon wants 10 or 15 books or 20 books, he can just print them out and get them off. And so that makes sense. And it's very bare bones, but he's got a way where he's making this work.
I think we're
financially.
also seeing as the consolidation of publishing happens, as the consolidation of everything else, in many ways it's leaving an openings for these small local presses that if they do really quality work, find a following. And that's why we want everybody to show up tonight at the reading and buy a book and support this, because this is important. We're bringing out important voices of the local community that really have a national resonance. And, and I think that you see that in Annie's work.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in, and I really want to go back to Annie. But the last two books that we've published, Maya Jansen's Murmur and Crush, and Annie Boutel's This Caravaggio
book, yeah.
This Caravaggio, have just this week been announced as finalists in the Eric Hoffer Poetry Awards. Maya's for the Montaigne Medal, and Annie's as an honorable mention for the Poetry Awards. So we have great poets in this valley, and Hedgerow is trying to publish them, yeah.
We should note one of those great poets is Annie Love Woodhull, who will be reading tonight at APE at 7:30. She is a resident of Amherst, has co-authored some 3 children's books, and her new book is titled Night with Its Owl. Rich Michelson?
Well, I'm going to just go right to you, Annie, and ask if you would give us another poem so that people can get a sense of what the treats they're in for tonight.
Okay. Bill wanted me to read War.
I did want you to read War, and the reason is because there's enormous poignancy in your poetry and in your work about the natural world, but you also really bring it home in a very real, very dramatic way, and I thought this was one poem that did that.
Great, thank you. War. I look at the strong muscle in my arm and use it like a man with you, pulling you to me. I kiss you, not taking for granted this moment, knowing somewhere else someone's lover is shot before her eyes. This comes into bed with us, and I am fierce with love.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.